if we're talking impact, just kind of like how we change lives, two of the startups from last year's cohort, one is called We Hear You. They make a door opener that allows you to make any door an accessible door. And so all you have to do is have an outlet and a drill, and you can make any door in your home open automatically. You can open it with a hotel key card. You can open it with all sorts of things. Another company from last year was called Wheelpad, and they essentially make accessible modular homes that can attach to a house. It comes with an accessible bathroom, bedroom, kitchen, and really overnight you're able to stay at home in ways that many people who are suddenly injured are often heading to rehab facilities, and they have to stay there until their house can be accommodated or they have to move.
GoodTrouble is a games technology company that is obsessed with the notion that accessibility in games is this fundamental unlock. And for gamers, that's the difference between getting invited to the fun and not being able to play. And for game studios, it's really a foundational part of any successful games business. And we're building solutions to serve both sides of that.
Welcome to episode 12 of Accessibility and Gen AI, the podcast where we talk to the people shaping the world of accessibility and artificial intelligence. I'm Joe Devon, joined by my co-host, Eamon and McErlean. And today we're speaking with my friend Molly Lazarus, who's director of Remarkable.org, an accelerator for accessibility-focused startups. I've been fortunate enough to be around Molly's orbit for several years, and you won't find a more wonderful group and smart group of people anywhere. Molly, welcome to the pod.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome, Molly. Delighted to have you today. We haven't met in person, but it's a pleasure to meet you virtually. You've worn a lot of hats throughout your career, right? I believe you were a special ed teacher, founder, business founder, and CEO, but you've had that theme or that thread throughout your career of always helping people. And you've spoken publicly about your personal connection to disability. Can you share a little bit about that with us and how that kind of tied into your career path?
Yeah, so my disability connection started well before I knew I had my own disability, but my mom had ALS, which is a neurodegenerative disease. When I was 6 years old, she was diagnosed. And so if you know about ALS, you know that throughout the progression, you end up needing a lot of different assistive technologies and a lot of different supports. This was in the 90s, so there were a lot less than there are now, but it gave me my first window into accessibility and kind of what the world looks like for people who are disabled and what it really is lacking in that area as well. So I always had disability as part of my life. I'd been working at camps. I thought that the way to impact disability as an adult was through teaching, which is where I ended up teaching. As you've mentioned, I've worn a lot of hats since I was a teacher, but in the process of doing so, I actually was diagnosed with ADHD myself. So it's been interesting to kind of come in at that lens of neurodivergence and realize, oh, interesting. Like a lot of these things that have both been my Achilles heel and my superpower actually have a name. And I think for those of us who have been diagnosed late in life, that's a little bit of a relief to be able to be like, that's what I'm dealing with. And there are supports.
What was your reaction to that diagnosis?
It came after a lot of burnout. I was really, really struggling, and I was working at a lot of different high level startups with a lot going on, and I was just burning out. And I realized maybe this is something else. And so when I eventually got the diagnosis, it was such an interesting realization to be like, oh, the reason you're burning out is because to focus, you have to work so hard and basically pretend like the computer is on fire. And if you don't answer this email, it will all go up in flames. That's how you've operated your whole life. And actually, getting support and figuring out how to approach from a different perspective there are things out there that can help.
Yeah.
And it's made it all feel a little bit less chaotic and a little bit more understandable.
You know, what's great about this podcast is I've known you for some years now. You've invited me to some amazing events, but I think it would be awkward for me to go to you and say something like, you know, your career started as an educator in special ed. What challenges did you encounter as a teacher that led to the creation of Bright Loop? It just doesn't roll off the tongue in daily conversation, but now I can really find out a lot more information. So I would love to hear more about that journey as a teacher and how that, like so many other startups, led to the creation of something great.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And Joe, it sounds like I have to turn the tables on you at some point and find out your whole life story. But in the meantime, so I started working in the space as a teacher, and I was noticing that every single kid, I taught first and second grade, every single kid in my class needed something different. And I was taking notes, didn't know I had ADHD at the time, but I was taking notes on like 500 sticky notes, being like, this kid needs this tomorrow to be more effective. Like, this kid needs to understand how to, their consonants or whatever it was at the time. And so I was doing it from a lot of different perspectives. And realizing that to effectively teach a room of kids where some know their letters and some can read chapter books, personalization is really the only way forward. And so at the time, I just reached out to some friends at MIT and I was like, hey, I need this thing for my classroom. Can you like help me build it? And some other teachers in the school started using it. And at some point, I mean, this was a while ago, this is probably 2012, someone was like, you're running a startup. And I was like, sure. And I Googled, what is a startup? that was really my entryway into being like, oh, you know, you can see a problem in the world, you can create a solution, and you can bring that solution to other people. And there are people who just do this as their career. And interestingly enough, you know, once I Googled what is a startup, we joined a bunch of accelerators, we got into Y Combinator, we ended up really diving into the startup world, but it really was through the lens of, hey, like, it's overwhelming to be a teacher, and if you're going to do it well, you have to do it personalized. And, you know, I think every teacher knows that, but it's been a through line for my career. Even now, like, I think some of the things that make me the most effective at running an accelerator are the things that made me an effective first grade teacher.
But that is a transition, right? It's a transition from the classroom to the whole corporate world, including like Silicon Valley. Did you physically move there as well?
We did. We were at the time, and we moved out there for Y Combinator. It was required that you move out, and I was in their education arm. So it was like the OG team of like Jeff Rolston, Jessica Livingston, Paul Graham, like all of us, 12 startups, and like a bunch of folks that are now kind of the best known names in the startup space. And so, yeah, I really dove into it.
And then that transitioned into Remarkable, is that correct?
Many startups in between,
Yep.
But I did find my way to Remarkable. I ran my startup for about 4 years, and then I worked at a few other education companies in the Valley before realizing that I really wanted to bring the experiences I had had into disability tech. Like there's a lot there, and I felt like the education impact wasn't exactly what I hoped for. And I felt like there was an opportunity here. And at the time, I didn't know the ecosystem here. And so I ended up cold emailing our sister organization, now our sister organization, but I cold emailed Remarkable in Australia. And I was like, hey, I think I'm going to build something like this in the US. Can I pick your brain? Turned out they were also working with a nonprofit in New York that wanted to build it. And one thing led to another. And I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to build something that I really care about without having to fundraise for it all by myself, which I'm sure any startup founder can agree is a like true delight.
Before we dive into Remarkable a little bit deeper, like during those 4 years of going through and working with many different startups, were there any I'm sure there was a lot of lessons learned, as we all do, but were there any that stand out to you that either came as a shock or came as really a hard lesson to learn that you pass on for anyone that's pretty generic for anyone doing startups?
I think it's the most stereotypical answer in the book, but I think watching failure, feeling failure, being a part of startups, big and small, after I left my company, you learn so much, right? And ironically, it's a teaching metaphor, I suppose, but I've always thought about how do you create the skills that you need and how do you put them in your backpack so that the next place you go, you have the skills that you maybe were like, oh, if I had had this. And so when I was running my startup, we did quite well, but I realized that, as a teacher, in addition to not knowing what a startup was, I also could have used more ability in marketing. And so in my next role, I worked my way up to the CMO of an organization and was like, I need to know marketing. I now know marketing. At the next role, I was like, okay, we need to shift and we need to look at this. And so even now, I love being on this AI podcast because I'm like, it's another thing. It's like, what's the next wave of things that you get to learn and you get to take with you? And I think if you can separate your identity from what you're doing, and you can really say, hey, I'm working hard to make something in the world that I think matters. It's not me, it is a thing. And if that thing doesn't work out, at least I can take these experiences and bring them to the next thing. I think that's the most important thing. And that's what we talk to startup founders about. It's like, we're investing in you as disability leaders. We're investing in you as people who can make an impact in this space, whether it is this startup or whether it is the startup that springs out of this startup. We're investing in the person and the person's capacity to make an impact. Of course, we have returns because we are investors, but I do think that expecting that this one will be the success is actually why a lot of startups fail, because they just hold too tightly to that.
To that one thing, yeah. No, it was a great answer. I think with startups, again, to wearing multiple hats, you have to wear multiple hats, but you have to a certain degree, take out the ego from it. You're not going to know it all. There's no way you're going to know it all. But to be humble enough to realize, okay, that is a gap for me. That is something that I need to level up. I can go a long way.
I introduced a friend to an angel investor, and he was giving him advice since you brought up investing. And what he said is that his investments, he calls them in his own mind donations. Because that sets the right tone for what's going to come.
Expectations.
But what's good about what you're doing is that as long as the company does some good out there in the world, that's the most important return. And with that, I would like to ask you, what do you feel like? I know they're all your babies, so you don't want to preference one over the other.
Never.
But if you can give an example or two of what you feel are some of the most impactful results that you've seen from some of your cohort, would love to hear good stories.
Yeah. So, gosh, there's so many great stories, and there's so many companies at different stages, because we bring in companies that are consumer goods, we bring in companies that sell to corporations, we bring in companies that are going through the FDA process, and we're in our cohort 3 years ago and are still working on their FDA submissions. And so stage really makes a difference. But if we're talking impact, just kind of like how we change lives, two of the startups from last year's cohort, one is called We Hear You. They make a door opener that allows you to make any door an accessible door. And so all you have to do is have an outlet and a drill, and you can make any door in your home open automatically. You can open it with a hotel key card. You can open it with all sorts of things. And if you're in a wheelchair, you know how often, even in your own home, you have to ask for help. And so they were telling me recently that there was this maybe 4 or 5 year old kid who had never been able to leave their house independently because they needed somebody to open the front door, right? Simple as that. Yeah. And it's wow, I can leave my house. What a huge, huge change. Another company from last year was called Wheelpad, and they essentially make accessible modular homes that can attach to a house. And so if you have a sudden disability, or, one of the stories they often tell is they're a Vermont company. There was a racially motivated shooting in Vermont, and it left the victim paralyzed. And it was a family that wouldn't have been able to afford to make their house accessible. And they were able to, within a very short amount of time, attach this accessible home to the family's home. The little connector, it comes with an accessible bathroom, bedroom, kitchen, and really overnight you're able to stay at home in ways that many people who are suddenly injured are often heading to rehab facilities, and they have to stay there until their house can be accommodated or they have to move. And so from a quick impact perspective, those are two of the kind of more accessible ones. Like, certainly we see companies across the space who are, Cephable is now working with lots of large organizations around how do we make AI more accessible across the board? How do we make interacting with our computers more accessible? We will hear about a few of our companies in this year's Accelerator, and we'll meet one on this call, but Blueberry Tech is solving the problem of how do we get people in an airport from that last mile transfer. They told me recently that I'm going to blank on the actual airport, but one of the big airports in the South, they have 400 people land every single hour who require a wheelchair transfer. And they only have 100 pushers to be able to do that. And so from a dignity perspective and from the opportunity to be able to get from point to point, they've created this autonomous vehicle that allows you it automatically deploys to the gate, it gets moved, it decreases the injury for all those pushers because the loads are less. They have to do, I was at the airport the other day and I saw an older man pushing 2 people while lugging a suitcase behind him. And I was like, I see this, like, I know this is a problem, but then you look at that and you're like, wow, like this could really change so cool. A lot.
How do you choose? Like, is there specific criteria that you have to go through? I'm sure it's not all financially based, but what is the criteria if there is such a thing?
There's a criteria. The answer is it's really difficult. We probably, should anyone want to, fund the nonprofit, we could take more. But at this rate, we take around 5% of our applicants who apply every year. And I send emails to some folks who are in that 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 being like, I'm pulling my hair out. Like, you would be in here if we had money. So it's very difficult even with our criteria, but we look at first, are you a remarkable startup? And so what we mean by remarkable is, are you doing something meaningfully different that will make an impact on the space? And so a better pen is not necessarily what we are looking for, but we're looking for something that feels transformative in that particular area and that we haven't seen this problem approached in that unique way before. We are generally in the US taking companies that are post-product, post-revenue, unless you're a med tech device. And so there's a few exceptions here and there, but for the most part, we really want to take companies at the point that we think with our current resources, we're most likely to accelerate, because an accelerator it's a contract, right? The startup is giving you their equity, they're giving you their time. And I take that really seriously. I think that we shouldn't be taking companies that we don't believe that we can accelerate. And so there will be some companies where I'll say, hey, come to me in a year and we can really go. But the stage you're in right now, it wouldn't be a good fit to apply this year. And you could, but I think it would be a disservice for both of us to have you in the cohort this year, because I don't think the impact we could make would be there. And
you mentioned the funds. Where does that come from? Is it across the board, or a certain amount of donations from individuals, or the public, or both?
Yeah, so we are a nonprofit, and We are 501c3. You can go to donate. In the US, we are funded through the Cerebral Palsy Alliance Research Foundation, which is cparf.org. We take funds from that. We take funds from major donors. It's an area where you find a lot of people who are like, man, I could have put my money on like the name of a hospital, but actually I can see the impact that investing in these startups makes. Now, the interesting thing that, if you think about the horizon of return, we're not there yet. We've only been running and investing in the US. Running in the US for 4 years, investing in the US for 3. But in theory, we take equity in the startups. And so hopefully, if a few of our startups are successful, there's a regenerative capital aspect that will allow us to say, hey, we can keep running, but we're not like asking for every dime to do it. And I think from a startup perspective, like having gone through YC, like, sure, I want to line the pockets of the wealthiest people with my equity. Like, not really. Like, I'd rather put my equity into something that was saying, hey, we're going to really support you. And then if you're really successful, another founder making another amazing disability-focused product will get that funding. And so it feels like a little better for me. It's like capitalism light.
Got it.
It's funny. What I was really impressed with was all of these great technology companies that, just companies that do different foundational work in AI, in different aspects of technology. And I love this podcast that's called How I AI. And I'm going to ask you, how do you AI? How do you use it in your daily life?
It's an interesting question. If you had asked me this 2 weeks ago, I would have had a very different answer. But I was speaking at a conference 2 weeks ago at a general startup conference, and I ended up spending a lot of time in the speaker's room with an AI researcher. And wow, how I AI is changing rapidly. In the short term, yes, I use the tools, I explore the tools, I want to know them, but I think what I realized is there's some horizons to how we need to be thinking about AI. And the first horizon for me is I need to deeply understand what's happening. And I need to make what's happening really accessible and in plain language so that our community can understand what is happening. But I think that's a short-term thing. I think the world as we know it, if it continues in the direction that it is perceived to continue, is going to be a different world in 5 years. And so I think that we're saying, what does it mean to AI now? And then in 5 years, I think we're saying, what does it mean to be human? And what does it mean what are the experiences that are actually foundationally investable? And are they actually now people experiences and no longer technology experiences? And what does education look like? I think there's so many questions that I am starting to have now that I'm like, hey, wait, this AI is cool. How I AI today is cool, and I'm finding it making my workflow easier and things like that. But actually, the better question is, how will I AI in 5 years, and how will AI me in 5 years? What are we thinking about in 5 years? And I think, I'm sure, I imagine you have guests that talk about this a lot, and you think about this a lot. But
changes every couple of days. It's like
I feel like every minute, I subscribe to the Neuron, and that's been such a good source of information to just follow the ball of what everyone is doing, and that's great. And I just can't believe how quickly our world is changing. And I think we, as people who are focused on inclusion and disability and education, thinking beyond year 1, year 2, year 3, and thinking actually fundamentally, what does the world look like in 5 to 10 years? And how do we make sure that the people we care about aren't left behind again? I think is really important.
That's one of the reasons why Joe and I started this podcast. And it's the reason, because unfortunately, as we well know, accessibility was an afterthought for many years.
Yeah.
The truth, and many companies playing catch up. With the speed that AI is going at, we cannot afford to do that again. We just can't.
Yeah.
So we got to be not on that bus, but helping drive that bus as we move forward. Period.
Yeah, and very grateful that you all have taken that and are taking the steps there, because I could not agree more. And it's really a moment that we need to all be looking at critically.
And with the solutions that are being submitted to yourself, do you see AI playing more and more a role in those?
Oh, yeah. Significantly. And I think in the short term, I think that's really, really good. I think, like you said, the internet was built inaccessibly. We have an opportunity, a shift point here to say we can build it differently. I think there is a lot of good that AI can do in the disability community in the short term. And I think there's a lot of things that could become problematic in the long term, but the tools themselves that AI can create and the way that AI can make processes more accessible, even if it's just agentic AI allowing someone who's blind to be able to order anything that they need, or the simplicity of chatting with an agent over having to deal with inaccessible web pages, I think is certainly, even just at a minimum, great. But I think that we're creating a world that there will be a lot less jobs, and there already are not a lot of job opportunities for people with disabilities. And so if we're looking ahead, what does that mean? In the short term, is it scaling up folks with disabilities so that they can stay in the employment world, or they can join the employment world with new skills? Or, how are we safeguarding our communities such that people with disabilities aren't another casualty of not having enough work opportunities and not making those work opportunities accessible?
Molly, the work you're doing plays an awesome role in that. It really does. Showing to everyone, those individuals with different disabilities, not only can they not be productive, they can be more productive in the unique view that they have on how to approach different tasks and different challenges. It's phenomenal. It really, really is phenomenal, the work you do, just to shine the light on that.
Thank you. We had a founder that applied, and I he was one of the ones I was I desperately want you in here. It's called Sonora AI. You may have met him. He is a blind man who is creating a voice agent. And his big theory was, hey, the internet was built inaccessibly. So blind people have been listening to this stuff read to us forever. If anybody should build a more accessible voice agent, it should be the blind community, because you all aren't going to want to do what we've done for the last 15 years. And unfortunately, it's a really crowded space. So he is a very uphill climb, but I do hope, whether it's him or whether they bring him into whatever the winner is, these are the exact things where you say, we're suddenly going to use things that a lot of people would have called accommodations a while ago. Mm-hmm. And so now, how do we, instead of just pretending that we can get user data, how do we bring in the people who really struggled with these systems before? And how do we get them to say, oh, you're going to realize that with your agent, this is going to drive you nuts. And so I think there's some cool opportunities, to your point, about the innovation and the perspective of people with disabilities.
Yep, we're doing that right now, actually, at Service now, doing these voice agents and voice interaction and building out that conversational AI, not just voice to text, but voice commands, voice navigation across the entire platform. So we've always found it's imperative to work with individuals with different disabilities as you build those out. Think about speech impediments as an example for voice. Unless you do that, you're not going to have
Yeah.
a collective, cohesive solution. You're just not.
Yep.
So better to do that up front. Absolutely.
It's good that you brought that up, because at one of your events, Molly, you mentioned you had a Google's Project Relate and Project.
Yeah.
Before we bring on your guests, let's talk about that project, whatever you want to share about that, but also like Ask Grandma. You did mention Blueberry already, Glidance. How about if you share a little bit about what those other two folks in your cohort do before we bring in your guest?
That sounds good. So this year in our cohort, we have 4 startups. I mentioned Blueberry already. The 2 others that are in the cohort that you won't meet today are Glidance. So they are founded by a man who had retinitis pigmentosa, who lost his vision, and they're making an autonomous guide vehicle of sorts. Not vehicle, I'm confusing, but they're making like a kind of a play on a guide dog. So you can hold it kind of next to you like you would a guide dog. It looks at obstacle detection. It can bring you to your location. Guide dogs are really expensive and really hard to get. And a bulk of the population who are blind actually are not born blind. And so when you're born blind, you have a lot of opportunities to learn the white cane and to be supported by orientation and mobility specialists who teach you how to use it. But increasingly, as we live longer, a lot of folks are losing their vision later in life. And so Glidance is not only creating a mobility device that allows people to navigate, if they're blind, but also a very important part is that if you become blind later, and you'll never learn a white cane, like you'll never take the time to kind of skill up in this area that is challenging to learn at first. And so they're really opening doors for people who maybe would have stayed home or wouldn't have been able to engage to get out in the community. Ask Grandma is
I have a follow-up question on Glidance. Does it have to go to the bathroom?
It doesn't, and you don't have to feed it.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Take it to the vet, no vaccines.
Great.
Ask Grandma is a company that is founded by a Native American founder. He is a speech language pathologist, and he was noticing in his tribal home visits that families who have a lot of medical mistrust and a lot of mistrust of the system were having children that were having developmental delays that were preventable just because they were, kids having kids, they were younger parents, or they just didn't know kind of some of the more traditional like speech therapy processes. And so he's building a tool that will rely on AI in some capacity. We're kind of working out what that looks like. But it's called Ask Grandma, and Grandma being the kind of traditional matriarch of the tribe. And so he's looking at how do you create a grandma-like AI agent that is you're able to have these conversations about your children's development with, you're able to connect out to the providers in the tribal communities who support you, but it is deeply embedded in the cultural teachings of the tribes and the communities that they serve. And obviously there are many tribes, so that will be different based on location. But he's based in New Mexico and has done some work in the Northeast. So these are kind of the areas that he's starting. And then the final company is GoodTrouble, and we actually have them on the call today. Arman and Anthony started out and are working on an incredible project around accessibility in video games. Their first kind of foray into this is AbleToPlay, which is a way that you can find video games that are truly accessible to your disability, to your needs, to your things. But they have a bigger vision around how do we help games and studios to become more accessible. And I won't say too much because they'll just blow you away on their own. But it's an amazing group of 4 startups, and we're thrilled to have this group. And I'm really excited that Arman and Anthony will be here to chat with you all today.
Hello,
Hey,
hello.
Hi, everyone.
Just like that.
How's it going?
Good, good. Would you like to do a brief introduction?
Hey there, my name is Arman Nobari. I'm the CEO and co-founder of GoodTrouble.
And my name is Anthony Gibson. I'm the CTO and co-founder of GoodTrouble.
First of all, I love the name. Love the name GoodTrouble. Yep. Can you just give us an overview before I think we're going to get a demo, but an overview of what GoodTrouble really is?
Yeah, absolutely. So GoodTrouble is a games technology company that is obsessed with the notion that accessibility in games is this fundamental unlock. And for gamers, that's the difference between getting invited to the fun and not being able to play. And for game studios, it's really a foundational part of any successful games business. And we're building solutions to serve both sides of that. I'm happy to kind of dive into the journey of getting here too, because this absolutely wasn't just an overnight idea. It's very much one of those classic problems, living through it and then needing to build a solution.
No good ideas are. No good ideas. Yeah. Love to hear about the background. Love to.
Sure. So, earlier in life, I was having a pretty normal, teenage years, having a great time in high school. And one day I got pulled out of class and I was told, hey, you have a really aggressive form of cancer. It totally upended my life. So I went from, playing soccer after class and, enjoying my friend groups to basically inpatient chemotherapy for what ended up being a really aggressive form of lymphoma called Burkitt's lymphoma. It's a pretty rare cancer. It was stage 3 when it was found, nearly stage 4. And, games were my escape during that time. Going through such an intense experience in, 2004, 2005. So before really the rise of even mobile games on your phone, which is kind of crazy to think about. You didn't have much. Yeah, I had some great books, but I also had my uncle's ThinkPad laptop that could, run some games and some good hospital friends that I would try and play games with. But, bad accessibility prevented them from playing games like how I could, and I took that personally. So after beating cancer, I kicked cancer's butt. I went on to get a degree in communications, and that's where I found a great friendship with this gentleman here, Anthony Gibson. We were fast friends, just builders at heart. And, we ran one business together before called Vault Labs, which Anthony will tell you about later on. And ultimately, we decided, we're really good at building really disruptive technology. We both had career paths that touched multiple startups and even stints at Google. We want to use our ability as technologists and really change makers to help affect the status quo of inclusion in an industry that we love, which is the games industry.
Awesome story, Arman, and congratulations on the cancer, honestly.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Very cool. Very cool. How did you guys meet? I'm always interested in how people met. Was it through work at Google or prior to that?
I love telling this story. We met in college, and we had a mutual friend that was a longtime friend of mine and had a class with Arman. And in the middle of the day, ran across campus, came and found me and said, oh my goodness, you have to meet this other person. It's basically just like you, but there's a different version of you and you got to meet him. And so that was like the initial connection point. As Arman said, we were fast friends. We immediately hit it off and really have been working together ever since, both in like a personal friendly side project capacity and then over the years building businesses together, which has been really fun.
It's funny, when I was younger, I did a lot of gaming and then have not really done it just because I know that I would be too addicted to it. When I get into something like now AI, I do nothing else and it's terrible. And so gaming is one of those things. But after I co-founded Global Accessibility Awareness Day, the gaming community was so involved in accessibility. They would always talk about it. And then Microsoft one year announced the Xbox Adaptive Controller for it. And then they released a Super Bowl video that was amazing, about just showing people in a way that I've tried so hard to explain to people why accessibility is important. And now I just show them that video, which thankfully Microsoft has allowed me to use in presentations and hopefully in this video, in this podcast. But I'm curious, what do you all think about the different hardware that is now out there? And could you just explain how it works? Because I think that that's an important element that people may not get.
Sure, I'm really happy to. I think that mentioning the Microsoft Xbox Adaptive Controller, any conversation that's going deep into really the history and impact of games accessibility has to mention that. But there's also, a really interesting and growing, vibrant ecosystem of peripherals and solutions to help make games more accessible, ultimately for the end consumer. So to kind of paint a picture for folks that are maybe unfamiliar with modern gaming or gaming hardware, you provide inputs to a game through some means. Maybe it's moving the mouse, maybe it's a keyboard, maybe it's a classic sort of two-handed controller that maybe you've seen in some other capacity with joysticks and buttons. And games are really demanding. Sometimes you have to do multiple things at once. Some games are quite demanding in terms of dexterity or repetition or fatigue. And there are some hardware and some software solutions for gamers to make that easier. So the Microsoft Xbox Adaptive Controller is a series of alternative input devices that address certain needs and limitations that people may have to providing the inputs to play a game. For example, maybe someone has a limb difference and they need a larger button to press because the buttons on a standard controller are far too small. Those are the types of accommodations that a lot of these adaptive controller projects support. Sony has the incredible Access controller, which was previously codenamed Project Leonardo. And there's also amazing organizations like Makers Making Change that have to be mentioned in any conversation like this, who are pursuing open source solutions for people with 3D printers or activating their community of makers to make 3D printed alternative input devices that the larger, more mainstream solutions are either too expensive or don't quite fit the needs of the end user. Ultimately, these just help get down and destroy barriers to play. There's a lot of focus on mobility barriers in this area, which is, respectfully one aspect of accessibility barriers in gaming. But it is a tremendously difficult to overcome barrier if these devices weren't available. And it's really incredible because it's the difference between playing a game and finding that favorite and not being able to play.
So with that, are you able to show us any of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to. I'll share a bit about what AbleToPlay is. So for some context, we make a free website called AbleToPlay. Anyone can go to it at abletoplay.com, and it is a personalized recommendation site for games. So you create a profile, you put in your needs, and then we tell you what games are a great fit for your needs. So just for any listeners, I'm showing the landing page on abletoplay.com, and the text says, discover accessible games that fit your needs. So the idea here is that we've spent over a year and thousands of hours across our whole team building this really deep resource. This is a collection of qualitative game analyses behind the scenes across hundreds of quality markers so that we can describe a game with very specific regards to accessibility. So for example, games do not report to storefronts or any other authoritative body a tracking of all accessibility considerations that is in the game. And even if they did, it would be overwhelming, because if you're really going to get granular enough, that's going to be hundreds of things. So we flipped the model on the head, and we created a system where you add your needs and preferences to a profile, and then we just rank games by how good of a match they are for your needs. So my recommendations are different than your recommendations because my needs are different than your needs. And this is sort of what it looks like when you use it. I'm showing an amazing game called Sea of Thieves, and it says 91% match, great support, and it has rankings across vision, mobility, auditory, cognitive, mental health, and other needs. And what that's saying is, we've taken in your profile of needs, we've assessed all of these games by your needs, and you can now buy and play Sea of Thieves with greater confidence that it's going to support the type of accessibility considerations you have.
That's just amazing.
Thank you.
Very well done.
Arman, how do you scale across like thousands and thousands of games to be able to do your due diligence to be able to do that rating?
Well, we scale very carefully. We currently have a few thousand games on the site, and the answer to that is really taking it slow. It's taken us over a year and a half to get here of really tireless work for our entire team. We crowdsource some of the information. So, for example, if a game updates and adds new accessibility support, our community will help us spot that. Our community will let us know, hey, such and such game had an update, and they can submit corrections or updates to the game pages. And that's, we love our community so much, and with the help of our community, that's the only way this site is possible.
You'd rather get it accurate, make sure it's accurate, rather than just, love it.
Absolutely. Just one quick anecdote I love to share about AbleToPlay comes from really the first quarter we launched, which was, it was public earlier this year, even though the project's been under wraps for much longer. We were getting some inquiries from early users who wanted help using the platform and sharing their experiences. And we got this one email from this amazing person. She's a mom. She had 2 kids. Both of them had a variety of different accessibility needs, and their needs were vastly different. The children's needs were unique. And she emailed us and said, it's always been a struggle buying holiday gifts. For context, we were in a beta period right around the time of Christmas. And she said, it's always hard buying gifts for my kids because I'm not into gaming, but they are, and I keep getting them games they can't play. And I feel bad about that. And, it was amazing to see what an impact this made on their family. She made a profile, plugged in her kids' needs, and was able to then find basically the perfect Christmas gift for each of them. And she emailed us saying, this was a completely different holiday season for her and her family. It was all smiles, and we helped make that moment happen. So even though it's a site really to serve the needs of gamers with disabilities, we see families and even occupational therapists using it to help find the perfect game for someone that they're caring for. And that's just, that's what fuels us every day.
Can you tell us a bit about the Vault Labs? Is that kind of connected to what you're doing now or totally different?
Yeah, Arman and I, after going to college together and spending our own time working at a few different startups, we came together and co-founded a digital product studio called Vault Labs. And it is a design consultancy firm where we worked with clients of many shapes and sizes, ranging from some of the biggest, including Google, to many other startups of varying degrees of scale. We had one startup that I think went from like a 0 to 100 in the time that we were working with them from all the other initiatives they were pursuing. But that was where we really cut our teeth in working together as a team and building out products, technical products. So there's a lot of habits and skills that we picked up from that time that carry us through. And it is also the point where I think we first had some initial discoveries around what impact we might be able to make within the video games industry. And that really opened the door for GoodTrouble and everything else that came beyond that.
So I think one really interesting thing about going from Vault Labs, Anthony, into GoodTrouble is just it really gave us that perspective of the impact of just more effective tools and software, and the ways that businesses are empowered to achieve their own goals. We spent so many years building those solutions for other companies, and it's really, I think, empowering to be building those for ourselves. And I think that goes into not just what we've shared today with AbleToPlay, like our ability to spot a serious problem in not just an industry, but that affects real people's lives at the end of the day. But also some of the stuff that we haven't dug into yet, and also, just spoiler alert, there's a lot we can't say. A lot we can't say about the cool things that we're building. But I can shed a bit of light on some context there. Just as a general topic, I think AI is going to be one of the most empowering, if not the most empowering, technology for people with disabilities. I think it's an absolutely transformative concept of how to interact with technology. And I'm not talking about having ChatGPT give you pictures of hot dogs or something. I'm talking about really being able to overcome barriers to economic, educational, and social empowerment for people with disabilities, and enabling people with disabilities to live the fullest life they want in whatever direction they want to take that life. I think it's an amazing technology for that. And that's part of our ultimate vision here, is to empower games companies and beyond with really effective technology solutions that leverage AI, not just for the flashy stuff you hear AI talked about often, but as a way to make the hardest, most annoying parts of their work not just really easy, but really easy to connect with. Using AI in B2B, for example, in building SaaS, as a way to make work easier and help people connect with the people that will ultimately benefit from their work, really humanizing their own mission for them in a way that traditional software is unable to. So while I can't get super specific as to what we're building or what we're cooking up, I think once you look past some of the worst behavior that gets all the news in the AI world, and really look at how this technology can transform the status quo for billions of people, I think that it's an incredibly exciting time to be building, technological solutions and looking at ways to uplift people and change their lives through these transformative technologies.
It's a great principle to have. It really is. And, we wish you all the luck in the world with the future of your product. We really do, making that positive impact in people's lives. It's very cool. Very, very cool.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate that. We tease the slightest bit about what this is actually on AbleToPlay. So if anyone's curious about learning a bit more about what we're up to, you can go to abletoplay.com/pilot. We're piloting some really exciting tools for not just game studios, but really anyone making interactive digital products. It's really exciting so far. And, we're so excited to see how the next few months go.
Well, thank you so much, all of you, for joining. And just to wrap things up, if anybody wants to get involved in your work, wants to bring their startup to Remarkable, cut a check, how can they reach you and get involved?
Yeah, all of the above is welcome. You can find me on LinkedIn, Molly Lazarus, molly@remarkable.org, and you can find more about Remarkable at remarkable.org.
Anybody interested in Able to Play, obviously, please go check out AbleToPlay.com and definitely check out our pilot page if anything we have discussed here sounds intriguing. We also have a Discord that we invite people who are passionate about the subjects to come join and be a part of our community. And
you can find me on LinkedIn. It's just my first and last name, Arman Nobari, ArmanNobari. Of course, check out Able to Play, abletoplay.com/pilot if you want to get involved or check out what we're up to. And you can reach me at arman@goodtrouble.team.
I get the feeling, Arman and Anthony, will have you back in maybe about a year and a half. And by that time, you'll be huge donators to remarkable.org. It all pays back.
We better get it on the calendar right now, then.
Yeah.
We want to know about all the good trouble you've gotten into.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that. Yeah, can't wait to come back. Thank you for all the thoughtful questions.
Thanks, guys. We appreciate your time.